Hey everyone! In this video we're going to talk all about how you can start making stained glass this year. It can be overwhelming seeing all of the different supplies that go into it, as well as actually learning each step of the process, but I'm here to tell you that it's a lot more simple than you might think. I'm going to show you what I bought when I first started, and then give you a full list of all the supplies with updated costs and links to everything. I've been making stained glass for nearly 2 years now, so I'm also going to tell you exactly how much I've spent from the beginning up until now. This will maybe give you a better idea of how much it costs long term if you were to consistently make new pieces, and I do have something for you at the end of the video if you are ready to start, so just keep watching. The first thing I will recommend is seeing if there are classes or workshops in your area teaching stained glass. This is a great way to start. You'll have everything you need, guidance, and you'll be able to get a feel for it, see if it's something you want to continue. If you don't have the option of taking a class in person, there are many guides and tutorials online. I put together a full class for beginners and it's available on Skillshare. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is the largest online learning community with thousands of classes for creatives, from watercolor painting to website design. I've been on Skillshare for years now, not only learning but also creating my own classes, and I knew I wanted to create one specifically for those that want to learn stained glass. In my class, I guide you through the entire process of making your first piece, from creating the pattern to soldering, and no matter what skill you want to learn or improve, you'll be able to find a class that will help you reach your goals. I've taken many classes across a variety of topics and categories like film, illustration, content creation, and so many more. So if you would like to join my Stained Glass for Beginners class, as well as any other class that you'd like, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So I started out by watching a few tutorials and then just learned the rest by doing it. And I'll show you my stained glass pieces from when I first started to my most recent ones on screen. But once you know the basics, you can definitely just learn and practice on your own. I will say that it takes time, there is a learning curve, but it's definitely not impossible. I struggled a lot with soldering when I first started. I did not like it at all and did not think that I could be good at it, but I am a lot better now. So that would be my main advice to anyone starting. Don't be discouraged if you find that it's not as easy as it may look. But trust me, it gets easier with practice. I know that from experience. And it's all worth it when you start to see improvement. So with that, let's get into everything I bought to start. I will show you exactly what I used to make my very first piece. You will need glass, of course. When you're starting out and you want to practice on some cheaper glass, I would recommend finding some clear glass. For example, the glass that comes in picture frames. I bought this sheet of glass and I just wanted to use one color for my first piece. This is the glass cutter that I actually used for a while, and I honestly do not know what these indents are supposed to be for, but anyway, this little wheel scores the glass, and you can use the end to tap underneath the glass to break it. I did not use any other tools, no pliers, it was just this. Now, I did try to make my first piece without grinding, and that did not go well. At this point, it was a little bit frustrating that I couldn't continue working, like I almost did not even continue stained glass, but I ended up ordering a grinder. The only other option is using like a carborundum stone to get rid of any sharp bits, but I don't have any experience with that. Grinding the edges of the glass is definitely necessary for the next step. I started out with Studio Pro Copper Foil, which is a cheaper brand compared to others, and as a beginner I had a good experience with using this one to start out. When learning and working on your first project, this is a good option so you're not spending more than you need to, and there are different foil options, but I will talk more about them later. When it comes to a soldering iron, I highly recommend one that is temperature controlled. I started out soldering with one that was not, and it definitely makes a huge difference in getting smooth solder lines. So halfway through soldering my first piece, I bought this Hakko iron. And then you'll need solder. This one is 6040. And there are also lead-free options if you're interested in that. I started out with liquid flux, and I'll also talk about the different types later. And then these brushes to apply it. And this is everything that I used to make my very first piece, and in total I spent $202.82. So this is the minimum that I would recommend starting out with, but now let's move on to a full list of supplies and everything that I use now. I'm going to break this down into sections for each step of the process. So let's first go over what I use to create my patterns, and I will preface by saying that this is optional. You do not need all of this to start, but I like to create sticker patterns, and to do that I use a Cricut machine and removable vinyl. You can also use a waterproof sticker paper. I have a full video showing exactly how I do this, so I will link that right here. Alternatively, you could print your pattern onto sticker paper and cut them out yourself. It just takes a little more time, but it will work the same. Onto the glass cutting supplies. This is a waffle grid mat. I use this as the cutting surface. This way all the small pieces of glass fall into it and you avoid placing the glass onto small shards that may damage it. This is the glass cutter I upgraded to from the one you just saw. It's much nicer quality and even came with different cutting heads depending on how thick the glass is. Next up are running pliers. These are used for mainly straight cuts, but sometimes curves as well if you know how to use them. Grosing pliers, which are used for removing smaller pieces with the flat side up, and then if you turn them so that the curved side is up, you can remove even tinier pieces and get rid of any sharp bits. I'll talk a little bit more about the glass grinder. This step is necessary to do the final shaping of the pieces and also smooth the edges so that the copper foil adheres properly. Everything should fit perfectly together after this step. There are also different bits you can use, such as a 1/4 inch bit for tighter curves or smaller areas, but make sure to always remove it when it's not in use, otherwise it will get stuck if it's left on for too long. And another important thing is to always make sure you're grinding with water. This way all the dust is contained and you're not breathing in any of it. Moving on to copper foiling. Without the foil, we would not be able to solder because the solder does not stick to glass. Sometimes people think that it's for aesthetics, but it's really just there for the solder to adhere to. So let's talk about the different types of foil. The brand that I use is Edco. There are 3 backing colors that you can get: copper, silver, and black. If you are applying patina, which changes the finish of the solder, you would use either copper or black depending on the patina you're using. And pay attention to this if you're using clear or transparent glass, but if the glass you're using is opaque and you can't see through it, any backing color is fine to use. I'd recommend copper backed since it tends to be cheaper. There are also different sizes of foil. 7/32 is the most common and that's what I mostly use, but there's also 3/16, which is this one, and then a 1/4 inch, but you would use them depending on the glass thickness or for aesthetic purposes. You'll need a burnishing tool to smooth the foil over the glass. I just use these paintbrushes because the slanted edge works perfect, and I recommend an X-Acto blade for trimming any overlapping foil. For soldering, I use this piece of corkboard as my work surface. Like I mentioned before, a temp-controlled soldering iron makes all the difference. This one is the Hakko FX601 and it works great. I feel like soldering can be the biggest learning curve for most people, at least it was for me, and investing in a good quality iron is absolutely worth it. The Canfield 6040 solder is the one I use. There are also lead-free solders, as I mentioned. They are a bit more expensive, but if you want to work lead-free, you definitely have that option. Make sure to have a holder or something to set your iron on. I use this metal container and tray. It also catches solder, and I have a damp sponge to clean off the iron. And then speaking of cleaning the iron, I recommend getting some tip tinner. This coats the iron with a thin layer of metal. If you ever have trouble with the iron not picking up solder or it just rolls off, this is what will fix that issue. Moving on to flux. You need this for the solder to flow smoothly on the foil, and there are 3 different types you can get: liquid, gel, and paste. I've always used liquid, but it dries pretty quickly, so you have to reapply it often, and it can be messy. But I recently switched to gel and already prefer this one. It stays exactly where you apply it, and the solder even seems to bead better with gel flux. You'll need some brushes to apply it, of course, and a small container to pour a little bit out when you're using it. If you're using patina, you would apply directly after soldering and washing the piece. There is copper and black patina. For polishing, there are lots of products you could choose from. I just use this wax to shine the solder, and I'm happy with the results from that. If I'm going to be hanging the piece up, I use pre-tinned copper wire to make my own jump rings, and those of course will go on when I'm soldering. I also use these jewelry making tools to make the jump rings, but if you want to buy pre-made jump rings, just make sure that they are made out of a solderable metal. Onto the hanging material, this is up to your personal preference, but I have this silver curb chain, and more recently I've been using waxed cord because I like the look of this one more, and I tie this using a slip knot so it can be adjustable as well. Last but not least, let's go over safety. You will need safety glasses. I use both disposable gloves and these nitrile coated gloves. And I highly recommend a mask when soldering. Use a respirator mask with vaporated filters, and make sure to always solder in a well-ventilated area with either a fan or a fume extractor. So that is all the supplies that I'm going to cover in this video. And now for how much I have spent on stained glass in total since I started. This is counting everything from all the glass, the tools, as well as the recurring costs of solder, foil, anything that I use for stained glass. I have spent a total of $951.21 in the time that I've been doing this. And that is not including how much I've spent on selling stained glass, like the cost of packaging and shipping, but hopefully this gives you a better idea of what the cost might be like. So if you are ready to start, I'm offering one of my patterns for free. You can find it in the description. The link will just take you to a page on my website where you can download the PDF files. And if you do decide to try it out, definitely tag me on either Instagram or TikTok. I'd love to see it. But that brings us to the end of today's video. I really hope that it was valuable. As usual, I will have resources and links to all of the supplies in the description. If you have any questions, just let me know, and thank you so much for watching.